Assalamualaikum and good morning to our respected panelists and audience. Today, we are discussing an issue that has recently gained public attention, whether we should bring back the UPSR or continue with the current UASA system that is introduced by the Ministry of Education. After UPSR was abolished in 2021, many parents expressed mixed reactions. Some welcomed the move, but others questioned whether the new system is as effective as UPSR. In fact, several news reports highlighted that most of the parents want to retain the UPSR because they felt like it is provide they felt UPSR provided clearer standards and stronger academic disciplines. For example, according to New Straits Times 2023, some parents groups argue that the absence of UPSR removed a clear national benchmark for year 6 students. So as a parent, I admit that I initially felt uncertain about UASA system. I grew up in the UPSR system and I believe it shaped discipline and competitiveness among students. So this will bring us to our central question today, which is, are exams still the best way to assess students' learning? So today we will explore whether traditional examinations like UPSR are more effective or whether UASA are better for our children. Now I would like to invite Encik Azizul from the Ministry of Education to explain the rationale behind this issue.
Okay, thank you, Amirah. So I understand that some parents feel uncertain about the shift from UPSR to USA. However, it is important that first we need to clarify why this decision was made. So, according to Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia 2026, UPSR or Ujian Pencapaian Sekolah Rendah was national high stake examination. So, it is taken by year 6 students at the end of the primary school. It functions as a centralized assessment where all students across the country sat for the same examination under standardized conditions. Because it was positioned as a major national exam, it carried a significant weight. Schools were ranked, students were compared, and performance often become marks of success at the age of 12. So, in contrast, UASE or WASA or Ujian Akhir Sesi Academic is a part of broader school-based assessment framework. WASA is not designed to function as a high-stake examination, but instead it works alongside continuous classroom assessment to provide a more comprehensive view of a student learning throughout the year. So, why did the ministry decide to shift from UPSR to WASA? So, firstly, the decision was made to reduce the cultures of high-stake testing. When one single examination determines ability, teaching, learning may become overly exam oriented. So we don't want that and we need to move from that. So second, the ministry recognized that learning is a continuous process. So a single national exam captures performance at the moment? No. However, understanding developments over time through feedback, practice and reflection. And third, the reform aligns with the directions of Curriculum Persekolahan 2027, which emphasizes holistic development, where education today is not only about recalling information, but also about communication skills, problem-solving ability, adaptability, and also character formation. So these competencies are difficult to measure fully through a single standardized examination. So this does not mean that assessment is removed or that standards are lowered. It's just that rather the form of assessment has evolved. WASA still maintains structured evaluation, but it is integrated into a broader framework that values both consistency and developmental progress. So therefore, the shift from UPSR to WASA was not about eliminating accountability. It's about redefining what we have now and defining the evidence of learning itself, moving from a single high-stakes snapshot, a high-stake examination, to a more balanced model that prioritizes learning and growth over ranking and pressure.
Thank you, Encik Azizul, for your explanation. However, uh, if I may respectfully challenge that point, I would like to raise a few concerns from a parent's perspective. So, first of all, isn't it actually good for students to focus on exams? Like exams create clear goals during the UPSR era. Students knew exactly what they are aiming for, they like achieving five A's and six A's in UPSR, And every year we saw news headlines celebrating top scorer in UPSR. According to Berita Harian 2019, more than 4,000 students achieved straight A's in UPSR that year. This achievement gives students something concrete to strive for. Secondly, regarding the pressure, I understand the concern about the stress, but I would like to ask, should we completely reduce academic pressure among students because some level of stress can actually build resilience. Research from the American Psychological Association explains that moderate stress, that is often called as eustress, can improve motivation and performance when managed properly. If we remove high expectation, are we also lowering students' ability to handle future challenges? Furthermore, UPSR function as a filtering mechanism, especially for admission into elite boarding schools such as SDP, Sekolah Bersama Penuh, and MRSM. So the system ensured that academically strong students were selected fairly based on national standards. Without a standardized national exam like UPSR, how do we ensure fairness and maintain quality control? So at this stage, I am not rejecting UASA entirely. However, I am questioning whether removing a strong exam culture may reduce competitiveness and clarity in assessment.
Okay, thank you, Amirah. I truly understand why many parents feel that UPSR was better than UASA. So after all, UPSR gave a clear grades, as you was mentioned, and clear ranking, and also a clear benchmark. Because of that, many parents feel secure as they knew exactly where their child stood. However, while I respect that view, I would like to support Mr. Azizul point that USA actually provide more benefits, especially in terms of reducing pressure and focusing on students' growth rather than just the result. So, first of all, we need to talk about the pressure. During UPSR era, everything depended on the final national examinations. In other words, a children's 6 years of learning were measured in a few days of exam. So as a result, the exam become extremely high stakes. So because of it was a high stake, students did not feel motivated, but they feel afraid. So I personally saw my students crying before the exams, losing sleep, and constantly worrying about disappointing their parents. In fact, some students were not scared of failing the paper, but they are scared of like going home with a bad result. So, in contrast, UASA lowered the extreme pressure. Although UASA is still a standard assessment, it is not a life determinant examinations like UPSR used to be. So instead of its function more as a checkpoint, this means as we use it to monitor progress, not to label the students. Besides academic growth, we must also consider mental health. So as a teacher, I feel this is a very important because primary school children are only like 10, 11, and 12 years old. At that age, they are still developing emotionally. So when they are constantly compared based on the grades, it can affect their self-esteem. Like during USR time, I have seen students label themselves like, I'm not smart teacher just because they did not get the expected result. But as we all know, a child is more than a grade, right? So with USA and PBD, assessment become more supportive. If a student is weak in one topic, we can like identify it earlier and help them improve before at the end of the year. It become intervention based, not punishment based. And honestly, from a teacher perspective, the classroom environment is healthier now. Because students are less afraid to ask questions and they are less scared to make mistakes. So with USA and PBD, assessment become more supportive. If a student struggle with a topic, we can like identify it earlier and provide intervention immediately. Instead of saying you're failed, we can say you're improving and will work on this together. So as a result, students feel guided rather than judged.
Thank you, Auntie Azizul and Puan Damia, for your insight about the UASA. But I would like to seek clarification. Like, could you please explain more about how UASA functions differently from UPSR in practical terms? Because we know that UPSR is also exam and UASA is also exam. For example, like how does it ensure standardization And how can we be confident that the assessment remains valid and reliable without a single national examination?
Okay, thank you for the question. Let me explain how the system functions first and why it's considered an improvement of the UPSR. So, based on Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia 2026, under the current framework, assessment offered through WASA combines with PBD under PBS. So, it's WASA, PBD, and it's under PBS. WASA, ujian ISSC academic, serve as a structured end of session assessment, while pentaksiran bilik darjah is conducted continuously by teachers throughout the academic year. And together, they form part of pentaksiran perasaskan sekolah, which is PBS, which emphasizes ongoing evaluation rather than relying on high-stake examination. Unlike UPSR, which function as a centralized national exam taken at one point in a time, taken at one point in time, WASA is designed to complement the classroom-based assessment. This means students are not judged solely on one examination performance, but instead their learning progress is observed, recorded, and also supported consistently. And WASA is also aligned with the student-centered learning approach. In this model, students are active participants in their learning process. They are encouraged to ask, question, collaborate, and also present ideas and engage in problem-solving tasks. Assessment must therefore reflect these learning experiences first, not just memorization of context, which is rote memorization. We don't want that. So in addition, the system support KEBAT, which is kemahiran berfikiran as tinggi or HOT, higher order thinking skills question. Students are required to analyze information, justify the reasoning, and apply the knowledge in new contexts. This shift ensures that thinking skills are developed, progress, rather than tested at the end. So, furthermore, the approach supports the development of 21st century skills as a communication, collaboration, and also creativity, and lastly, critical thinking. These competencies are difficult to measure through one written national examination alone. So, through continuous assessment, teachers can evaluate how students work in groups, solve alternative problems, and express their ideas clearly and relate more to the real world. And in summary, WASA combined with PBD under PBS creates a more holistic assessment model and it maintains structured evaluation while recognizing that learning is continuous, multidimensional, and central and centered student growth rather than a single examination outcome.
I fully agree with Mr. Azizul because from my experience, WASA is not just an exam but it's designed to support student-centered learning. In my classroom, learning is no longer about students sitting quietly and memorizing facts. Instead, they discuss, work in groups, and present their ideas, and sometimes they also solve problems together. So, therefore, assessment must also reflect that approach. That is where PBD plays an important role. Through Pendaksiran Bilik Darjah under PBS, I assess students continuously during activities and not only during the exam.
Mm.
So because of that, I can see their real progress, such as how they think, how they communicate, and even how they apply knowledge. This clearly support KBAT, which is hard since students are trained to analyze and explain and not just recall the answer. So at the same time, PVD helps develop two-center skills such as collaborations and communications, which cannot be fully measured through one written paper. So, for example, I have students who may not score the highest in tests, but they show how strong leadership and creativity during their project. So, with PBD, their strengths are recognized. Most importantly, from my point of view, this approach improves students because they receive feedback throughout the year. They do not wait until the final exam to know whether they fail or pass. Instead, they improve step by step.
So after listening to both of you, I understand the intention behind UASA. However, I still have some concern. So one issue is standardization.
Mm.
UPSR was centrally marked and nationally benchmarked. This ensured consistency across schools. So with UASA being partly school-based, parents sometimes worry about differences in marking standards between schools. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, UPSR helped filter students for competitive institutions like SBP, Sekolah Berasmanan Penuh, and MRSM, Maktab Rendah Sains Mara, when the selection system becomes less exam-based, some parents fear that academic excellence may not be prioritized enough. In my opinion, assessment must not only focus on emotional well-being, but also maintain strong academic rigor. If not managed carefully, continuous assessment may become too subjective. Therefore, my concern here is not about rejecting holistic education, but about ensuring credibility and fairness in assessment.
Okay, thank you for raising those concerns. Truly, that it's kind of one of the hot question in around students and parents also. So they are a valid question, and many parents share the same stories, especially regarding the standardization, right? SBP and MRSM selection and the academic rigor. How does they evaluate? How does one get into MRSM SBP? First, regarding the standardization, it is true that UPSR was centrally marked and nationally by March. That's correct, which gave parents confidence in consistency and also consistency lah. However, UASA is not completely unstructured or left entirely to school. The test items are still prepared according to the national standards and aligned with the national curriculum. So teachers are guided by clear marking rubrics and moderation processes to ensure fairness. In fact, the professional discussion among teachers, internal moder- sorry, among teachers, internal moderation, and district level monitoring help reduce subjectivity. So while assessment is more school-based, it is still guided by national benchmark to maintain credibility by KPM 2026. Secondly, about the SPP and the MRSN selection, right? Previously, UPSR functioned as a major filtering tool for entry into this competitive institution. But we must ask ourselves, should a single examination at the age of 12 determine a child's entire academic pathway? The current approach does not ignore academic excellence. Instead, selection into SBP and MRSM now considers multiple indicators, including academic performance through WASA. Classroom assessment requires co-curricular involvement and sometimes specific entrance assessment. So this actually gives high achieving students more than one opportunity to demonstrate their ability rather than relying on high pressure exam day. So this was cited from KPM 2026, and regarding academic rigor, sorry, I agree that it must be maintained. Holistic education does not mean lowering standards. Okay, WASA still assess core academic knowledge and higher order thinking skills. In fact, because learning is continuous, right, teachers can identify weaknesses earlier and intervene sooner. So this can strengthen the academic mastery rather than weaken it. Continuous assessment does not replace rigor. It's supported by tracking the progress over time. As for the concerns about the subjectivity, that is why training exists. Teachers are required to record evidence of students, why training, rubrics, and documentation are emphasized in PBD. The teachers are required to record evidence of students' performance. Assessment decisions are not based on feelings alone, but observed criteria and documented work. It was all framed. So I would like to say this. The shift from UPSR to UASA is not about removing fairness or excellence. No, it is about expanding how we define excellence. Academic achievement remains important, including for the institution like SPP and MRSM. But now it is supported by a broader evaluation system that reflects both competence and character. Our aim is to maintain credibility, fairness, and strong academic standards, while ensuring that no child's future is decided by one single exam result. So I still believe that WASA is the next level of UPSR. That WASA is the transformation from UPSR. Yeah.
So I share the same view as Mr. Azizul that assessment should not only focus on the exam. From my experience as a teacher, I see every day that students' behavior and attitude are just important as their marks. In fact, sometimes they are even more important. Sometimes they are even more important because this is what show their real learning. So the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan or FPK reminds us that education is about developing the whole child, not just filling their heads with facts. It's about character, discipline, responsibility, teamwork, and even empathy. For example, in my class, I notice who helps their classmate, who listen carefully, who take responsible for their work, and who even speak up to share their ideas. They are all behavior that show that the child is learning how to be a good, responsible person. And honestly, exam alone cannot show this.
Oh,
Holistic.
Yes. So this is where WASA and PPD really help. Unlike UPSR, which only tell us what a student know about one point in time, uh, WhatsApp plus PPD lets us see students in actions during group project, presentation, class discussion, and even daily activities. For example, a student might not always get the top score in tests, but if they are actively participate, encourage their friends, and even take responsibility for their learning, we can see that they are growing in behavior and confidence. On the other hand, students who get a straight A's but never collaborate or listen to others might still need guidance in
mm-hmm.
behavior. That's why I
Mm.
think continuous assessment through PBD is so important. So we can give feedback, help students reflect on their actions, and also guide them to improve little by little. And I also noticed that when we focus on behavior as part of assessment, students become more aware of their actions affects others. They start helping their peers, managing their emotions better, and taking part more actively in class.
Mhm.
So this builds self discipline, empathy, and responsibility as things that exam alone cannot reach. So from my point of view as a teacher, WASA and PPD fits perfectly in FPK. They let us access the child as a whole, not just their memory or test
Mhm.
taking skill. And 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 in the classroom, this really helps students become responsible, respectful, and confident, and not just academically capable, but also ready for life.
So after listening to Mr. Azizul and and Friend Damia, I have to admit that I am beginning to see the issue from a wider perspective. So
Mm.
as a parent in Malaysia, grades have been our main measure of success for many years. But now I realize education cannot stop at grades alone. It is also about shaping balanced individuals. So perhaps the real question is not whether exams are good or bad, because we know
Exactly.
that exams are important, but what truly matters here are balance. Because at the end of the day, we are not just raising students who can answer exams questions. We are raising future adults who must survive and succeed in the real life world.
So, thank you, Amirah. I appreciate what you shared just now. I think many parents feel the same way for a long time. Grades and exam results have been the way we measure success, but that's not okay because we want to evaluate them as a whole. And as parents, it is normal to want clear results that show how well our child are doing. As you mentioned, education cannot be only about grades. Exams are still important because they help us see whether students understand what they have learned. However, exam alone cannot show everything about a child. For example, exam can always show qualities like teamwork, responsibility, confidence, or how a student solve problems. And these are also very important skills that students need in real life because they're going to use it outside of classroom setting. So that is why the Ministry of Education 2006 introduced WASA together with classroom-based assessment. WASA still checks students' academic understanding, but teachers are also observe students' progress during daily learning activities, and that this allows us to see how students
Mhm.
uh, think, communicate and work with others. So I agree with you. So the issue is not whether exams are good or bad, because we're still using it, right? So exams still have their place, but what is important is balance. In the end, at the end of the day, our goal is not only about it's not only to produce students who are good at answering exams question, but also young people who are responsible, confident, and ready to face the real world. And yeah, how about you, Ian? From a teacher's perspective. I think you will relate more to students nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. So I share the same perspective as you, Mr. Azizul. So as a teacher, I would like to enlist as every day in the classroom. I don't just see exam candidates, I see children who are still learning how to manage their emotion, how to work with friends, and even how to take responsibility and how to believe in themselves. So yes, exam results are important. They help us to measure understanding. They give us direction. But as a teacher, I cannot define a child only by a number on a paper. Sometimes the quiet students who doesn't score the highest, the highest is the one who always help clean the classroom without being asked. So sometimes the students who struggle academically is the one who shows the most improvement in confidence. This change may not appear clearly in exam slip, but they matter. This is why I support current approach. With UASA and classroom-based assessment, I'm, I am able to see my students more clearly, not just their academic level, but their behavior, their growth, and their effort, just like I mentioned earlier. So to me, education is not about producing perfect scores, but it is about guiding children to become a better version of themselves, not more responsible, more respectful, and more confident each day. So, in answering your question earlier, are exams still best way to assess student learning? From my perspective as primary school teacher, exams are still one of the tools, but they are not the only tool, and they should not be the most powerful one. So, because at the end of the day, when our students leave the school, what we truly hope to see is not just a good result, but yeah, also a good character.
So now to answer the questions, are exams still the best way to assess students' learning? We concluded that exams are still important, but it should not be the dominant method of assessment. A balanced system like UASA allows us to keep academic quality while developing character, confidence, and values. Because in the end, we are not just preparing children for exams, we are preparing them for life.
So therefore, exams still have a role, but they must be balanced with continuous assessment to reflect students' overall growth, and only then can our education system truly prepare students not just for tests, but for real life challenges.
Uh, yes, uh, Damia, do you have any perspective on this?
Oh yes. As for me, exams are still important, just like I mentioned earlier, but they should never be the only measure of the child
Yeah.
ability. What truly matters is having a balanced system that not only measure knowledge, but also nature, character, confidence, and readiness for life. So that's all from me.
So, in conclusion, as a parent myself and moderator today, I realized that while UPSR provided clarity and competitiveness, UASA represents a shift towards holistic growth. Um, the real challenge the real challenge is not choosing between exams and holistic assessment, but ensuring that both work together effectively for our young generations today. So, thank you to our panelists for coming and giving these meaningful discussions. I hope today's forum help us reflect deeply on what truly matters in education, not just grades, but also for growth. So, thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sabar. Yeah.
Guys, ya. Silakan kita siap kerja.